Hey everybody, it's Trace here from Black Hair Compass, and I'm coming to you guys with another video. So it's really early here. It's like 6:15 in the morning and my whole family is still asleep, and that's the only way that I'm able to make this video. But I want to get right into it. Many of you guys on Instagram asked me, is it possible to come out interlocks? Yes, it's possible to come out interlocks. I'm doing it. My entire length of my locks is interlocked. I started my locks with interlocks and I maintain them with interlocking, and I'm still able to comb them out. So I'm actually here to walk you through the process I took to achieve that. So like everybody else, when I decided that I wanted to comb out my locks, I turned to YouTube and I started doing some research. And the really popular method that I was seeing across the board is that most people, when they start combing out their locks, they saturate their locks with water, they coat their locks with conditioner, and they take a rat tail comb and start combing or picking the locks apart. That method seems to work for a lot of people. For me, it turned out horribly. I broke so much hair. I did it on like 3 or 4 locks, and my hair broke off terribly, and it almost caused me to think, well, if my hair is going to break this much from the detangling process, I might as well just cut my hair, because I'm not going to have any hair by the time this is over. But instead of just cutting off my locks, I turned back. I took a couple days off from combing out locks so I wouldn't get frustrated. And I found this lady who said that she actually couldn't comb out her locks with water and conditioner because she was losing a lot of hair, and she tried combing out her locks dry. And so I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to give it a shot because right now I am not having much success. So I switched my tools. I used still the rat tail comb, I got some coconut oil, and I got a dental pick. So I stopped wetting my hair, I stopped applying conditioner, I saturated my lock with coconut oil, and because the tail of the rat tail comb was too fat to fit into my locks, I decided to start using a dental pick. So I learned a couple of different things with these tools. I learned that yeah, it's possible for me to detangle my hair dry. The rat tail comb is too big for me to use, so I needed to get a dental pick. And so I learned a couple of things. The dental pick, while also that works for a lot of people, ripped my hair. I was shredding my hair while using it. So I had to stop using the dental pick. I also realized that the rat tail comb I was using had a rough edge. Like, it's almost, you can't even see it. I didn't see it with my eyes, but I realized that when I was using it to comb out some of my locks, the hairs were catching on the plastic of it, and so I had to get rid of that comb. The coconut oil did work really well. So, but even still, even though I was making progress, I realized that these weren't really the tools I was going to be using to comb out my locks. So I switched to yet a different set of tools. I kept the coconut oil. I got a different comb. I bought a new comb from Amazon that was brand new. It had no nicks along the plastic. It was smooth. It was a smooth finish, so my hair wasn't catching. And then instead of using a dental pick or the tail of a rat tail comb, I used a push pin, because I saw that some people online, when they were removing Sisterlocks, they had to use a push pin because that was the smallest kind of needle that could fit in and separate the lock, the tangles of the lock. And so that started working for me really, really well. Using the push pin, using a rat tail comb that had a smooth finish, and saturating my locks with coconut oil was working for me. At this point, I wasn't losing any hair that wasn't shed. I wasn't breaking any hairs, and everything that was coming out was just hair that had already been shed and was tangled in the lock. And because I started having such good progress with that, I started thinking to myself, I wonder, do I even need coconut oil? So I stopped using coconut oil, I stopped using conditioner, and I stopped using water. And I would loosen my locks with the push pin. And once it was loose enough, then I would start combing it with the fine teeth of that comb. And it was working for me perfectly. And that's the 2 tools that I've been using thus far to comb out my locks. You'll see in the image that I included some scissors, and there are some times where it's important for you to sit there and comb out knots, but there are also some times where you're like, okay, this single knot is going to take me 45 minutes, so it's better if I just cut it out. And so I have the scissors, I have the fine tooth comb, and I have my push pins, and this is what I've been using. I've been combing out my locks dry, and I haven't been losing a lot of hair. There's a couple of things to note. I know that for some of you, like, the notion of combing your hair dry is like sacrilegious, and I absolutely agree with that. If you are someone who is a loose natural, you really have no reason to be combing your hair dry and without conditioner in it. And there are some people with locks, when they are removing locks, it works better for them to use water and conditioner. But I do think that there are some hair types that don't do well with that, and that's my hair type. And when you actually think about it, it kind of makes sense, because technically speaking, our hair is most vulnerable when it's wet. And the reason why it's most vulnerable when it's wet is because its elasticity increases dramatically. Like, you could basically, and what that means is, like, if you were to take a strand of hair and wet it, what that means is the elasticity increases. So if you were to pull it, it would basically just keep stretching because its elasticity is so high, and it would stretch to the point that it would break. When your hair is dry, it doesn't have as much elasticity, which means it has more resistance. So if you're pulling on it, your hair is actually going to kind of pull back to keep itself intact, because its elasticity isn't as high because it's dry. So for what that meant for me and my detangling process was, my hair was actually better equipped to withstand the harsh detangling while it was dry, because it could actually resist the pulling of the comb and not break. When it was wet, I would start detangling it, and because the detangling was so intense, my hair would basically just collapse under the tension of the detangling process. It would just break off because it wasn't able to resist the pulling. And so my hair did better actually while being combed dry. Another thing is as you get like more accustomed to detangling your hair, you'll start to be able to tell the difference between hair that's shed and hair that's being broken. And the way that I am able to tell the difference is because I can hear it. When I'm doing something to my hair with the push pin, if I'm like detangling it and it's breaking, it makes a popping noise. And that's how I know, okay, I'm breaking hair right now. But if I don't hear the popping noise, but I'm still getting a lot of hair coming out, I know that that's shed hair. So that's something that for me, that's my indicator, like, okay, I'm being too rough. I need to loosen it up and use less force so that I'm not getting that popping noise while I am detangling my hair. I mean, and aside from just like doing it, like you're gonna have to figure out what your rhythm is. For me, the way that I have been doing it is, what I do is I insert the push pin into the lock and I just use it to loosen the tangles. I'm not actually detangling with the push pin. I'm just using it to kind of like tug at some of the tangles in the lock and make the holes just wide enough for the comb to be able to fit inside of those little spaces and comb out the tangles. And that's basically what I've been doing. So I always alternate between the push pin and the comb, the push pin and the comb, the push pin and comb, and I just do that until it is completely detangled. Another thing that I noticed in my detangling process is that there were three things. One, I had no buildup in my locks, which I was really happy to see. Because that's always, if you're someone who's trying to do a healthy lock journey, you're trying to avoid buildup in your locks as much as possible. And so I was happy that as I was combing out my locks, I didn't have any buildup. I did have quite a bit of lint, which was interesting because I don't have any visible lint on the surface of my hair, but as I was taking out my locks, there was a lot of lint embedded in the center of the lock. And believe it or not, I'm not saying that combing out locks is easy, but it's easier when all you're combing out is hair. When the lint was getting tangled in my hair, it was very difficult to remove. For whatever reason, that doesn't really make sense to me. It feels like, if I'm combing out my locks and I come across some lint, I would just comb it, and then the comb would catch the lint and take it out. But that wasn't really what was happening. All these hairs would get tangled around the lint, and it was really difficult to remove those. And so the lint in my hair caused a lot, slowed me down a lot. It was difficult to remove that. Also, another observation I made about my hair is that it was the ends. It is the ends that are the most difficult to remove. Like I have some ends, some of my ends feel soft, but many of my ends feel really hard. So hard that I was like, did a pebble get like stuck in my locks and wrapped up in the lock or something like that? Like that's how hard it felt. And of course, when I would detangle it, there was no rock in my hair, but it was just my hair had condensed and solidified into such a tight tangle that it literally felt like a rock. And sometimes, and so those were the most difficult locks, ends to comb out. And at one point I was like, you know what, like this is taking too much time. So what I did is I would feel like, okay, where's the hard, where's the hard, where's the hard? Okay, it's starting to feel soft. Okay, I'm going to cut it off where it feels hard and get soft again. But after doing that, I realized that a lot of my length is actually caught up in the ends, which kind of makes sense because that's why it's so hard, because there's actually more hair in my ends than there is in the rest of my lock. So if I'm trying to retain as much length as possible, it really doesn't serve me to cut the ends off. So I just have to take my time and comb through it as gently as possible. And then eventually it starts loosening up, and then you'll make progress all the way up to your roots, and you're able to comb it out. It has been a long process. I've been doing this for a little under a month now. I know a lot of people have been asking me, like, how long do you think it's going to take you? I honestly think I'm going to be combing out my locks until December, maybe even into early January of next year. And I'm willing to just take it slow. I mean, primarily because the time is going to pass anyway. And ultimately, I have plans for what are my next steps with my hair. And it involves me having hair, not having short hair. So I'm willing to take the time it's going to take to comb out my locks. Another thing that I want to point out is that if you have a lot of locks like me, and it's going to take you like a month or 2 or 3 months, like you really have to get, like there's an amount of mental preparedness that goes into combing out your locks, because I know for me, there's sometimes where some locks are so tangled and so frustrating to comb out that you just want to give up. And I would recommend that instead of giving up, that you just stop. I've found that when I've gotten to a point where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to cut them off because this is too hard. When I choose to just stop, like stop for that evening and then try it again the next day, I'm able to comb it out. Like it's not necessarily that the lock is impossible to comb out. It's more likely that your patience is running thin and you don't have as much energy to focus and take your time. So that's usually a sign that you're fatigued and you need to stop. So that's what I do. I only comb out like 2 or 3 locks a day because my locks do take about 45 minutes to an hour to comb out each. So I'm only able to do 2 or 3 a day. I mean, I'm married, I have a daughter, I'm working, like I don't have hours and hours and hours to just set aside a day to comb out my locks. I only do 2 or 3 in the evening. And that's it. And however long it takes me to get it done at that pace is how long it's going to take. So yeah, take your time. If you feel yourself getting frustrated, stop, rest. Don't do any more for that day and just try again the next day, because all of the locks that I'm like, wow, this is impossible, I'm not going to be able to do it. When I just stop and I try it again the next day, I get it untangled. So it's not a matter of if it's possible or not possible. It's just I'm likely not being very patient. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Put them in the comment section below. I hope that this video is helpful. There's a lot of videos out there about combing out locks. Please take your time to figure out what tools and what technique is going to really work for you, because combing locks dry with a push pin and a fine tooth comb is not going to work for everybody. Just like the conditioner and water didn't work for me. So you need to take your time to figure out which technique and which method is going to work for you, and test a couple of locks, and whichever one you have the most success with, that's the technique that you should stick with. But as always, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.